Hey everybody, welcome to Artist Soapbox. Artist Soapbox is a podcast featuring Triangle area artists talking about their work, their plans, their manifestos. I am your host, Tamara Kassane. This is an Artist Soapbox snackable, a bite-sized piece of a longer podcast episode. If you'd like to hear the entire conversation with Dasan Ahanu, the co-founder of Black Poetry Theater, follow the link to episode 46 at artistsoapbox.org. And don't forget to subscribe. Is that how most of your pieces come together?
Yes, for me, yes, because I always have to sit and process what I'm going to write. So I may have an idea and something may stick with me, but very rarely do I go from idea straight to writing. I go from idea to jotting down the thought that I had and then sitting through and processing, like, what does this thought mean? What made me react that way? What was it that drew my attention? And that's how the piece gets fleshed out. And in that process, there may be other things that I've seen or heard or other things that happen that may relate that I start to kind of just patch together to decide how I want to shape the piece.
How does the transition between what is on the page and what you hear when you speak the piece out loud, how does that process work?
So for me, it starts by working through kind of where I want to go with the piece, putting it down, sitting with the words and, editing, revision, making sure that it makes sense. It flows, it transitions. And then it begins. The final phase is for me to actually share the piece. So usually what I'll do is I'll find a space, even if it's just to read it, just because I want to hear it, because it helps me hear how the piece moves.
Right.
And then I can kind of just see how people respond to it. If I decide that it's a piece that I'm going to do something with, then I'll memorize it. And then for me, the memorization process is not done until I can say it. So then I'll make my way back to an open mic to say the piece. Mm-hmm. And then I'll listen to see if it feels comfortable, if it moves the way I want it, because there's a difference from reading it to doing it. And so there's that process before I'm really comfortable with the piece. Mm-hmm. Up until then, like, there's always, some worry, some concern. I may make some changes and edits, but once I've gone through that whole process and I feel comfortable with it and I've got it in my head, that's usually when the piece is at least complete in that moment.
Do other people perform your work, or do you write for other people to perform?
Other than the theater company, no. Okay. That was sort of my first experience in doing so. And it's really interesting. It's really interesting to hear how people interpret it. The only other time, which is not to the same level, is because I'm involved in Poetry Slam. We have the ability when you do a team slam to write pieces collaboratively, which means that you each poet may be saying work that was written by the other poet that's a part of the piece. But usually it's a couple of lines. It may be a stanza. It wasn't until working in the theater that I wrote something that I actually got to watch someone perform the entire piece. And then actually for me, that actually led to, for a couple of pieces, led to edits. Because I'm like, now I'm hearing a different voice with a different, who doesn't have the same understanding of the piece. And I can see where it's tough for them. And I'm like, oh, okay. All right. And so then there's another thought process that goes through and kind of, hearing the piece.
Yeah. Let's talk about Black Poetry Theater. Mm-hmm. You're coming up on a 10-year anniversary of founding this, of co-founding, right? Why did you form this company and how has it evolved over time?
Well, initially it was just sort of just getting this bug. Myself and the other co-founder, Church the Poet, had participated in a production that he was responsible for putting together called Black Poetry. And we worked with Lee Lester Holmes, and at that time it was APET Theater, Alternative Perspective Ensemble Theater. APET was the company that she had, and she was in the area and performing and doing work with Man Bites. And she got the idea for wanting to direct a piece that was centered around poetry. She met Church, and they started to kind of flesh out the idea. And he just asked the collective of poets if they wanted to participate. And so what it was a large ensemble performance piece that was a patching of different poems together. And what Lee did was she blocked and staged all the poems. Some of us had theater have been in theater before. Nobody extensively, in my experience in theater, had been with traditional works. And so it was a unique experience because by that point in time, I had been on stage for a long time, but never in that way. And like I said, my theater experience wasn't, with traditional works. August Wilson and pieces, where you had very specific lines and very specific roles. I had only been in one other performance piece. And even then, it was a totally different process. I was working with Herman Laverne Jones on a piece for the National Black Theater Festival. And it was a mix of drama and dialogue and music and movement. And so it was a really thick piece. So we were just experimenting and we loved it. And so Lee ended up moving. And so we were like, okay, the person who got us into this isn't here. So we sat and we asked ourselves, okay, we're going to just try this. Yeah. And we both said, okay, well, we'll just try it and see what happens.
Artist Soapbox is a listener-supported podcast. Please support the podcast via our Patreon page, patreon.com/artistsoapbox. For more information, go to our website, artistsoapbox.org. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as well. All of this information is in the show notes. Artist Soapbox music is composed by Bart Matthews. Thanks so much, and we're out.